Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Fancy.
Hi, everyone. This is Karen from wikiDeeks, and I have the great pleasure to be here today with Eric Christian Olsen. So, hey, Eric.
Hi, Karen. Good to hear you on the phone after meeting you in person.
I know. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've been hoping to interview you for a long time and couldn't be more excited to get the chance to talk today.
Especially after that big premiere.
Oh my gosh. Well, that involves my first question. We actually have a few questions we've wanted to ask you literally for years, and a few that just came up after this week's episode. So
Great.
let's start with the premiere. I mean, congratulations. It was a fantastic episode, and I think Deeks fans and really all the NCISLA fans I've come across really loved it. So congrats to you all on that.
Thank you. It was an ambitious swing, and I think it's our show. They honestly didn't know who was coming back, and so they had to set it up story-wise where it could be that obviously somebody doesn't make it. So going into the summer, nobody knew if anybody was coming back.
Wow.
So that was kind of the platform leading into that, and then the resolution of how Frank kind of, once he found out that we were all coming back, how he ended up executing that return, I think was the best version of our show.
Yes. Frank Military, he writes some amazing Denzi scenes.
Yeah. He writes some amazing stuff, period. I think that, if you look at the loss of Sam's wife, that was Frank as well. That he's got, I think, really strong emotional sensibilities through character. I think that's one of his strong points. So to have him writing this episode of, impending death, as I always said on Twitter, or not Twitter, Instagram. The scene in the church is one of my favorite scenes we've ever done. And that was on the page. That was Frank's.
It was beautifully photographed and beautifully written and beautifully acted.
Yeah,
it was great. So when he writes these beautiful emotional scenes, but he also can write some really dark and scary things. So I'm just wondering, when you first get your hands on a new Frank Military script, like, what goes through your mind? Are you excited, or are you maybe a little afraid for Deeks?
No, I have a wonderful relationship with Frank, a wonderful working relationship and a wonderful personal friendship. I think that he, even when he goes incredibly dark, I think it's a reflection on finding the human element in that darkness. So even when it's kind of too much to handle, it's usually some sort of reflection of finding love in those places, or hope, or relationships, or it's not just dark for dark's sake, which I think there's a lot of entertainment that is that. But I think that Frank is really searching for beauty in there. And I think that's interesting because, there is enough chaos and pain and suffering in the world that to find something beautiful in the midst of that is an important story to probably tell.
Yeah, totally. I mean, even beyond Frank Military's darkness, really for the last couple seasons, Deeks has had a kind of a series of dark and traumatic events, primarily where he's worried about Kenzie, but also, as you mentioned, the loss of Michelle seemed to have hit him really hard. And I'm wondering, exactly how traumatized do you think he's been by these experiences?
I think more so than most, because I think that Deeks doesn't have a strong foundation of family, which is a consistent theme for kind of all our characters. But I think that Deeks was obviously, the tumultuous relationship he had with his father, his mom almost having kind of role reversal in that it was not a traditional mother-son relationship. So when things happen, catastrophic things happen within the team, I think it weighs more on him. And of course, when it comes to Kenzie, this is the first real relationship and probably the first thing he's ever really loved in his life. The idea of losing that, I think, is is kind of too much to carry. And Frank is an amazing wife and a bunch of amazing kids, and so I think that for him, that partnership, especially with his wife, really carries a lot of weight into what he brings to the relationship between Kenzie and Deeks, which is that Deeks gets to play the human element, which is like I can't do this. That great speech which is also, I think it was Frank, the great speech on the rooftop where he goes, I saw what happened to Sam, and there's no way I make it through that. I can't do it. Which is really fun to play because you're not playing a superhero. You're playing a deeply flawed, empathetic, sometimes selfish character. Which, those dramatic scenes over the last couple of years have probably mostly been from Frank.
Yeah,
which is
primarily
interesting. But it explores, again, that's my favorite stuff to explore, which is like, what is the human element of all this? And how do we navigate it when we have a character that is so deeply invested in a relationship that he doesn't know if he can function without.
Right. So how do you think those traumatic events of the last few seasons have shaped the Deeks that we're going to be seeing in season 10?
Well, that's the other part of the show that's interesting, is that there's always a pretty quick bounce back. Hold on 1 second. I have to pull into CBS Redford. Cloud9 Productions. You're getting to overhear this.
It's okay.
The bounce back here. Actually, I got it. Yeah. I'm in the. Sure, of course. The bounce back has to be quick because it's procedural television, right? So the format doesn't lend itself to long recovers emotionally. So we have what is a lot like life, I think, which is that traumatic events, and then we have to move forward with our jobs and our relationships and our lives, and then they come back, whatever that is, the trauma, the scarring of those traumatic experiences come back in really interesting ways. So this season, Denzi, I just said that out loud. This season, oh my God, Deeks and Kenzie are trying to plan for a wedding. And as many obstacles as they've dealt with, in their professional lives, there's something really interesting about watching these two try to navigate the planning of a wedding, which we all, kind of some universal themes and obstacles. But it's interesting how it's playing out, and I mean, you saw the best version of that in that last scene, which is just like, I don't care. I just want to be with you. The rest of it doesn't matter. I think that's the underlying theme that's driving the rest of the season, which is that if it's 5 minutes or if it's 50 years, the answer is still you. Oh, that's pretty good.
Very nice. You could put that in the vows.
Yeah.
And
the wedding episode is coming up, and it's written by Scott Gemmell. So Scott Gemmell, nobody's better at, drama, action, comedy, perfectly down the middle of all three of those things. So I'm really excited he's writing that episode. That's
great. Excellent. So let's go back now to kind of the very beginning. We've always been interested in the initial formation of Deeks as a character. I mean, in his first couple of appearances in season 1, he kind of seems a little serious and, I don't know, maybe a little reserved even. It's not really until a few episodes into season 2 that he's joking around a lot and becoming the source of a lot of humor. So I'm curious, when you were first hired to be on the show, what did they tell you about Deeks?
They didn't tell me a lot because I don't think they knew a lot. At that point, you're coming from, the ashes of Dom, and trying to figure out what does the partnership for Kenzie look like. Hold on 1 second. So they didn't know, I think, what the future kind of held for Deeks. They knew they wanted someone opposite Danny to help drive scenes and to maybe be a love interest. If you looked at the template of Weatherly and Pablo, what's her name? Diablo. But I think that as, you know, this is what's great about our writers, as they realized that so much of my sensibilities were comical, especially for diffusing situations, and as we did more research about, you know, guys in this situation, and my brother was a former SEAL, and when things go dreadfully wrong, a lot of times these guys go to that place to diffuse the tension. So we use that as a tactic for sure with Deeks. And you need that in a show like this. It has to have that balance. I think that humor disarms. And as you look at these, you know, these episodes, you can't just have things blowing up and people being serious. There has to be the human element. There has to be comedy. And we want to invite these people and family into our homes every week. So they realized that that was kind of a strong point for me. So they really kind of doubled down in the comedy into the second and third season. And it was though, if we look at the evolution of the character, it was more that he was kind of the butt of the joke. It was more of a clown for like 2 or 3 seasons because they didn't know kind of what that looked like. And that's a small and slow evolution to kind of where it is now. But that took a lot of work to be like, why, you know, we have to find the balance of being a great agent, but also being able to carry these comedy runners and all the stuff that they're doing in season 2 and 3.
Did your tendencies towards improvisation kind of influence the direction the character took? Did that have any effect on how it evolved?
Yeah, I think that's what I mean by sensibilities is that, you know, Shane was amazing. And he said, you know, do one as scripted and then try anything you want. And so from a very early stage, I would do a scripted one and then I would try a bunch of stuff. And the percentage of times they started using the improvs got higher and higher until they started kind of writing that and giving me, you know, hey, we need something here, we need something there.
Yeah.
But also we have a lot of writers that are really, you know, one of my favorite lines ever, which is the CIA, FBI, and then I say MOUSE. That's not an improv. That's a Scott Gemmell line that he put into the script. So we have a couple of really strong comedic writers, and Gemmell's kind of the best example of that.
How early on did anybody tell you about Deeks' dark side, or did you just learn about that as you got different scripts?
No, that was an ongoing conversation because I think that to balance out that light side, we have to have something that he's, you know, coming from, or it's a coping mechanism for something much darker, or it's his way of navigating through trauma. Otherwise, it's not a layered character. So we had numerous conversations kind of what that background was, and the one I think that made the most sense was that relationship with his dad.
Yeah.
And that was Shane. That was Shane's kind of storyline and background, which we never got to see before he left, which is like, what is that episode of the M Deeks or whatever he kept promising?
Deeks M, yeah.
Deeks M. M Deeks M. Which hopefully, you know, Scott will take over and do at some point. My guess is probably at the end of the season or maybe next season. But yeah, that was all Shane for that backstory, which I found, you know, was so fascinating to play. That you're introduced to violence at such a young age, and violence under the banner of preservation of someone you love, I think is a interesting platform for a person to become a lawyer and a cop.
Yeah, definitely. What about Detective Boyle? At what point did you find out Deeks had killed his ex-partner? And how did you feel when you found that out?
I mean, that again plays the parallel of the same relationship he had with his dad, which is an interesting thing because I think there's inconsistency with the kind of idea of morality for somebody that believes in due process and believes in kind of the letter of the law coming around from the background of the judicial system. I think there is inconsistencies. And so the only way to kind of play that for me is that he's cut up with his own kind of sense of morality and what is the definition of right or wrong. And so this guy was dirty and all these things were going down and he took measures into his own hand and had no choice. But instead of coming forward and being like, this happened, he buried it. So that's a really interesting and kind of tough thing to navigate as an actor of how do you play this. So that's why that scene with Hetty was so delicate, as you know, the revealing of those sins. And that's why those scenes are so, that scene specifically was so fun to play because she knew, and he got to take it off his shoulder. And then he said, and then God, I don't know who wrote that episode, but something about telling Kenzie, and isn't Hetty's response, life sometimes is much easier without those people? Do you remember her line in that?
I don't remember specifically, but she definitely gave one of her enigmatic lines that could be interpreted in a dark way, potentially.
Well, the way I interpreted it and the way I played it was horrifying, which is that her response to that is, if we don't have people that matter to us that much, then there's no one, you know, to disappoint, which is just like terrifying.
Yes.
But also part of kind of how, at least her exterior, how she navigates us as a team and her life. Yeah, those are fun reveals. Oh, by the way, you killed a cop and then buried it. You're like, oh, wonderful.
So do you know the exact circumstances around Boyle's shooting, or do you think viewers will ever get to find out?
I think more of that will come out, but I killed him. There was a fight and things went down, and I killed him in the hotel room, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of debate amongst fans about whether it could have been semi in self-defense versus, you know, exactly how much in cold blood and calculated it was.
I think it can't be in cold blood. It has to be in some form of self-defense. Because there's no version of Deeks that just goes in there and hunts this guy. And there, you can turn him in, or you can do, because especially in my second episode, or the season 2 premiere, he had already done that, right? And that's when he puts the gun up to the other guy's head, and because he's killed his girlfriend at that point.
Yes.
The first. So, and if he didn't do it there, he's sure as heck not going to do it in a relationship that isn't that emotionally charged. So I think it was definitely in self-defense.
Okay, good to know. So when you think back to when you first got the role of Deeks and how far he's come since then, what are your thoughts on the overall arc of the character over the past 9 years?
I'd rather ask that question to you guys. I think you have just as much insight into that as I do. Do you want to say anything about that before I do?
No, you go ahead.
You know, my instinct, no matter what it is, so if it's Dumb and Dumber or if it's The Thing, is to play the most human version of it, no matter what the circumstances are. And so I think that the human evolution, or the human arc to the story beats that they gave me is the most authentic version I could come up with. Which is that you never feel like you're watching something that isn't real. There's never a kind of inconsistency in how he. Sorry, that's John. There's never an inconsistency in how authentic it is. So for that, you know, there's things that I've disagreed with along the way, things that didn't make sense to me as far as what those story beats were. But even given story beats that I have no control over, I think that arc, that evolution has been nothing if not authentic and human. And flawed and terrified and loving and compassionate and fearful, you know, all the things that make us who we are. I think it's why people are attracted to the characters, because it's not a superhero. He's a very, he's like us, right? He's searching for love, and he's searching for acceptance, and he's searching for family, and all the things that the rest of us are searching for.
Exactly.
Can I make a deal with you?
Sure.
If you give me 4 minutes, I have to drop this thing off and then run to NBC. I'll come back on, and then you can have me for another 15. Is that a deal?
I think that's a great deal.
Okay,
I'll
4
totally
minutes.
take that deal.
I'll be back.
Okay.
I'll be back in 4 minutes.
Okay.
All right, we're back together again.
Being recorded. We're back in action. 4 minutes.
Awesome.
Totally worth it. All right, now we have 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Okay, perfect. So let me ask you a few questions about acting on the show. One thing I'm curious about is well, it's no secret that you seem to have fantastic chemistry with everyone you work with. I think at Comic-Con like a year or two ago, Daniela Rua made the observation that it's because you're so adaptable. She called you Adapt Man and said it was like your superhero power. Is that the key, do you think, to creating chemistry, or is there more to it?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that, and first off, thank you. That's kind of you to say that, and kind for her to have said that. I think the key to chemistry is listening, right? Because if you're listening, then you're adapting naturally. So whether it's a scene with Detective Whiting, who I have great chemistry with, or a scene with Linda Hunt, who I have great chemistry with, or a scene with Barrett Foa, who I have great chemistry with, it's all it is listening. So it's me, we naturally change as we listen to the people that we're interacting with. And the pace and all that stuff is very different for all those characters. The relationships I have within those characters are always very different. But the key is just like life, is just that you listen. And if you look at I think the people that are the most charming in reality, all they're doing is making sure that you know that your opinion and what you're saying has value and they're in it with you. And that's chemistry.
Nice. Do you ever catch yourself kind of not listening so much and then have to kind of reorient yourself?
Well, and that's the part of me that comes from improv comedy, is that the first couple of times I would get on stage as an actor, I'm 16 years old, lying and saying I'm 18, doing improv comedy where you walk on stage, there is no script, and you're going to have to perform for 2 hours. You're trained to listen, because all that is keeping up. So for me, that's the easiest part of it. And Danny's really good at it too, which is that I'll change stuff left and right to get the right reaction from her. And I'm sure there's interviews where she's talked about this as well. So I'll say all sorts of stuff in my coverage or in shots where the two of us are together to make her listen and to get the best versions of ourselves. One of my favorite scenes we've ever done is after Deeks was tortured and he's not sleeping, and her character comes to check on him and they eat Chinese food, right? That whole scene on the couch, and most of it is played in the 2-shot because half of that scene was improv, which was just about trying to find the rhythm and the beats of showing that Kenzie is Kenzie is the catalyst for Deeks to heal. So a lot of those 2 shots, I'll try all sorts of stuff, which forces her to listen as well.
Right. So aside from providing perfect reactions to your improvs, what else makes Daniela what else do you think makes Daniela such a great actress?
She is a good listener. I think that she's able to tap into, I think, the human side of herself, which makes her empathetic. It makes her, this is a tough question. There's a lot of things that makes Danny great. But I think a big part of it is just her ability to listen and react. I mean, if you were asking me why I'm good, I'd say the same thing, just listening and reacting. And then putting yourself in a position of what this character's POV is. She does that with her eyes closed. At this point, we're all doing that with our eyes closed. She was playing a character for 9 years. That's a good question, and I don't feel like I've done justice to the answer. I don't want to. She's an amazing actor. She really is an amazing actor, and you can see it this weekend or on the season premiere. That scene where I'm passed out and she's acting with a corpse. She's great. There's no listening in that scene. That's just her on a platform having to do that on her own, and she's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask you about Sam and Deeks. They're also one of our favorite couples on the show. And I think it's because they've always been a bit of an odd couple, but they've always had fantastic chemistry again. I'm curious if your and LL Cool J's respective approaches to acting might have impacted the dynamic of the two characters.
If his approach to acting and my approach to acting have impacted the characters, is that what the question was?
The dynamic between the characters.
That's a great question. I cannot answer for him what his kind of method for acting is, but I do know that he is, you talk about adaptable. Whatever it is that I try in a scene, he goes with me. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it goes to a place of magic, which is where we find ourselves most of the time in those scenes. It's why I love a two-shot of him and I in the bullpen scenes. I think that him and I together, it's such a contrasting POV in the world. It's such a contrasting upbringing. They're such different characters, but they're wonderful together. I mean, those are some of my favorite scenes are with LL. And I think I love him so much as a human. I think I love him. I love Todd so much that comes across. I can't help but smile because he makes me laugh so much. And I think he feels the same way about me. And I think that comes across too, which I think is a really interesting journey, because at first we're like, his character looks at my character like, who is this dude? And I think at first LL is like, who's this dude? And very quickly, the human side of us, I think, became good friends. But I think that the character's journey of respect and all the things that happened to earn that with Sam and Deeks has been really fun to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's one of those guys that I think has chemistry with everybody too. He's so good.
So let's talk a little about Linda Hunt. I know you've talked about what a joy it is to act with her. Why do you enjoy your scenes with her so much? What is it about her that makes her so special? And what have you learned about acting from her?
She may be the greatest listener on the planet. There's something so incredibly grounding about her. And I won't say who it is, but she was doing a scene with a guest star. And maybe I shouldn't tell the story. Well, you don't know who it is, so it won't matter. But okay. She said to the person, she goes, listen, stop. Look at me and listen. Look at me and listen. And I was just like, oh my God, it's so true. Like someone's off doing like a performance, right? Which is a presentation of an emotion or a presentation of a belief versus an interaction, which is what we're doing. We're interacting with another human being. And Linda is so grounded, and the gravitas of what she brings to a scene is so powerful that you end up having to do less with Linda just because of how powerful of an actor she is. So my approach to those scenes are sometimes to just be across from her and let her drive the scene. Which is why I think Deeks has some of his most emotional scenes with her, is because she's the one that's pushing the scene instead of the opposite, where it's Deeks driving the scene, which is so much of what the dynamic is a lot of times with Kenzie. She's remarkable. It's one of the and I say this honestly, it's one of the true joys of the show to do work opposite her, because she is a fucking icon. And not in a way of like, oh, this person's been around for so long, we got to respect them. In a way that they've done such amazing work throughout their lives and have continued to do such amazing work. And doing it now, it elevates everything. It elevates the show. I think I said this in an interview. She makes the show better. She makes her lives better. Linda Hunt is she's incredible. And you can see what happens when she doesn't have those scenes. That I don't think they have the emotional impact.
Absolutely. So I think I only have time for a couple quick questions. So let me ask you, if you were to imagine where Deeks would be in, say, 15 or 20 years, what would you hope his life looked like? Like, what would you wish for him?
This is a cheat answer, but I just hope he finds peace. You know what I mean? I hope that character finds whatever it is that he's looking for, because I'm not sure if he even knows. I think he has this idea that he wants to, you know, maybe go back to be a lawyer, but I know he wants kids. I think that's probably the thing that's the most important to him, which ironically is the same thing for me. I think that I found the best version of myself, you know, as a father. But I hope that he finds peace, because the amount of stuff that that character has gone through in the last whatever years of his life, I hope he finds home, which I think is with Kenzie and probably with kids.
Yeah. And then the last question, if you could describe your experience working on NCISLA using only one word, what would it be and why?
One word?
One word.
I hate that Instagram has stolen this word, because it's become a parody unto itself, which is blessed. But the reason to back that up is that, you know, there are millions and millions of people out there trying to work as actors. And there's a shortage of jobs. And even on, you know, if you get lucky enough to get a good pilot, to get that pilot picked up, you know, it's like 10%. To have that pilot go more than, you know, 8 episodes is another 15%. To get a second year is another 10%. So the odds against you are so insurmountable and so massive. To be able to do a show for as long as we've done, to have the unbelievable support that we've had from you guys, the fans that have followed us from Tuesday to later on Tuesday to Monday, later on Monday to Sunday, and then later on Sunday. The fact that shows are coming out now and they're premiering with like a 0.8 and 6 million viewers. And we just did season 10 with a 1.1 and almost 9 million viewers. There is no other word for that. Then we are so blessed. To be able to work with Danny, who I love to death, you know, that now is my sister-in-law, and to see her and my brother have 2 kids, that is the definition of blessed. To have, you know, Linda Hunt on your show, to work with LL Cool J every day, you know, who was an icon for me and such a hero when I was a kid, for him to be the person that we all wanted him to be this wonderful human being, to work with these people on a regular basis, to have Shane and to have Scott and Frank and all the amazing writers that have been so collaborative in the process, to have the support of CBS, you know, to have David's staff in the studio who have stood by us for this whole time, to have Katie and Kristen, you know, our publicists who've been the best version of it. Anything can go wrong to cancel a show, but everything has to go right to get this kind of run. And I think that's an accumulation of just having amazing people everywhere. And that's, you know, from publicity to directors to the crew, to our first AD, who is hands down the best first AD on the planet. Everyone has killed it. And that doesn't happen. And the only word to encapsulate all that, I think, is just to be incredibly blessed.
That's great. Beautifully said. So I'll stop there. Again, Eric, I just want to thank you so much for your time, and also thanks to Katie at CBS for helping to make this happen. We know what a special opportunity this has been, and we really appreciate your generosity. So best wishes from everyone at wikiDeeks, staff and readers, for a fantastic season 10.
Thank you.